Our next presenter is Dee Adams. She holds a Master's of Science in Public Health from Johns Hopkins School of Public Health in Baltimore. She currently works as a global HIV advisor, consultant, and has supported national HIV programming for over 20 countries. Her primary focus in her work is supporting gender and sexual diverse people, sex workers, and drug users to gain access to health and healing services. She carries over this advocacy into psychedelic healing spaces and urges for the need to create safe spaces within psychedelic, plant medicine, and neo-shamanic communities. As a transgender woman, she navigates a variety of spaces all over the world and is emboldened by what she sees and experiences. She has authored and co-authored over 15 peer-reviewed journal articles and has written global guidance documents for the World Health Organization. She is applying her skills and making a new foray into psychedelic medicines. She splits her home between Oklahoma and Johannesburg, South Africa. Dee Adams.
Hey, everybody. I'm very happy to be here in this momentous state of being with all of you. And I want to share with you these ideas I've been having around psychedelic medicine spaces and how they can be more affirming and welcoming to gender and sexually diverse people. So that's pretty much the title of my presentation. So this is what I'm going to talk about, is getting in some terminology, going in a little bit about me. I think knowing where someone comes from can kind of tell you what they're thinking. My current work, the liminal space model that I'm just thinking about, and kind of wrapping things up. So we've heard different terms here. We've heard like queer and LGBTI, or no, here you all say LGBTQ. In international settings, it's more LGBTI, intersex is the I part. But for this presentation, I'll be using the term gender and sexually diverse, GSD. And that's for people who do not identify as cisgender and or heterosexual. And it's more inclusive of non-Western identities outside of LGBTQ. So I'm thinking of like Hijra in India, Wara in Malaysia, and Two-Spirit people, and First Nation people. So talked a little bit. So this about me, I'm white, I'm American. Those are two really big privileges that I'm very much aware of in my travels throughout the world. Transgender woman, I'm from Oklahoma, and I've come from a Baptist background. So I've identified as a gay man, as gender nonconforming, and non-binary, and these identities I've gone through psychedelic medicine spaces and have learned a lot from each of those perspectives. So we kind of went through all of this in my introduction, and I've worked a lot with my current full-time job. What pays for me to be here, what pays for me to kind of do this psychedelic medicine work on the side is that I'm a global HIV advisor. So I go to different countries all over the world and give like macro level advice to donors, to governments, to community-based organizations on how they can follow best practices in HIV. So I work a lot with like gay, bi, and other men who have sex with men, sex workers, transgender people, and people who use and inject drugs. And we talked about this too, about, and then I have this marrying of the scientific world, but then I also have my spiritual side, the psychedelic side, where I am a shamanic healing practitioner and teacher. So this is just like the different countries where I've worked in, and some of them I've lived in. So I'm currently living in South Africa, but I also split my time between the US and South Africa. And medicine, there's medicine work all over the world, for sure. So some of my psychedelic medicine background, it's played a really key role in helping me to manage and understand my own mental health, as well as my own gender and sexual identities and expressions. And currently I focus a lot on ayahuasca, and though I might talk about ayahuasca and other people might as well, but there are lessons learned in ayahuasca medicine spaces that can also be applied to psychedelic medicine as well. So kind of my ayahuasca background is that I've navigated these spaces as a gay man and as a trans woman. I came to ayahuasca through the Santo Daime, which is a religious organization that has structures in it that wasn't really resonated with me, but I'm very, very thankful for that experience and the lessons I learned there. And I've been to Peru for Adaitas in the Amazon and in the Sacred Valley, and I co-founded an ayahuasca community here in the United States. So how did I come to be in Chacruna and meeting with Bia? So Bia thankfully gave me the opportunity to talk about my own experiences with psychedelic medicine, and I wrote an article called 6 Playful Lessons from a Transgender Journey Through Ayahuasca Integration. And so I became aware of my transness in an ayahuasca ceremony. And it wasn't until my integration of my transgender identity to who I am now, occurred through this period of time, through years. It was a years-long integration process. And, but the only time I worked with it was that one time in an ayahuasca ceremony, and then every time I tried to work with it in ayahuasca, the medicine would say, no, you need to do this outside of medicine space. So that's the article I wrote about these lessons I learned about how I came to be where I'm at today. So in one part of the article, I talk about we need more safe spaces for gender and sexually diverse people. So to integrate, to experience, and share our ayahuasca and psychedelic experiences. So Bia referenced this earlier, and on online settings, people lost their minds, not about my article. That's the key thing. People were okay with the article, but I got a lot of trolling around this, around asking for, saying we need more safe spaces for people. And the biggest issue around it, people were saying, and it wasn't, the main trollers were white, and they're a mix of what I perceive their genders to be. People just really lost their minds around it and thought it was about separation, and that, we are all one, that whole mindset. But that saying that we're all one is the equivalent of saying, like, all lives matter. It's really bypassing the our experiences, and like all lives matter is around bypassing Black Lives Matter. It's needing to have our experiences validated, and if we say we need more safer spaces, then that's okay too. So in my quest for looking for these safer spaces, I met Brandon Barclay, who is the administrator of this Facebook group, and so it's the LGBTQ plant medicine and healing community. And this is where it's a safe space to talk and connect with other people who are queer, gender and sexually diverse, so that we might disagree with each other, but there's not that trolling that's happening there. And I really feel like it's a space a step into that, creating those safer spaces that I'm advocating for. So in addition to wanting to further extend my advocacy, so I wanted to create a online website. I don't know if it's an organization or what. It's just kind of coming together, but I'm calling it GSD, Ayahuasca, Gender and Sexual Diversity. So I really want to focus on retreats, education, and research. There's a research survey that I'm about to complete. We're in the pilot phase on understanding the experiences of gender and sexually diverse people in ayahuasca settings, planning some ayahuasca GSD only retreats, and wanting to create education around harm reduction, around navigating spaces, and educating space holders on how to provide safer spaces. So the research that I'm pulling together, wanting to understand people's experiences, not in the experiences of drinking the medicine and then drinking ayahuasca and that experience, but what's it like entering into a space with the facilitator, with the assistants? Have people experienced any kind of discrimination? And these have been adapted from other broader research, public health and social science. It's going to be online, completely anonymous, like the IP address won't even be collected, so it's just completely anonymous with a controlled distribution. And if you're interested, you can email me at iagsdresearch@gmail.com or go to isgsd.com. So going into the model, going into the model, so the liminal space model is this idea I'm thinking of how to explain or how to provide safer spaces for gender and sexually diverse people. So I say the word liminal because it's the space between solid states. It's a transitional space. And the picture that I have here is, you think of this fire escape, there's two different levels, and it's the staircase itself. That's the liminal space. So it's the avenue that takes you from one space to another. And I thought, when I was reading more about liminal spaces, that's really how I picture these settings, because we don't stay in psychedelic medicine spaces all the time. It really is this liminal space where this ambiguous state of mind where we can get great lessons and help us to move from one state to the other. So this is just really informed by my own experiences, talking to other GSD people, and some of my work and background in cultural competency in healthcare settings. So part of my work globally is also providing education to clinics and to donors and to U.S. embassies all over the world on really basic terminology on gender and sexually diverse people, and how can HIV programs be better designed with them in mind. And here are just some of the influencers from the liminal space model. I like to acknowledge the people who influenced me in my work. Jay Saveus, Clancy Kavnar here, Kavan Simpson, and Kitty Zippel. So here are some of the challenges that we all know GSD people face in psychedelic settings. So it's really around like bias and prejudice and stigma and discrimination, and coming in with all of this like baggage that's often put on us, and it really, in my experiences, has kept me and other people I talk to from participating fully or integrating fully in these spaces. Also, GSD people, we might not be able to be given the opportunity to identify ourselves or feel safe doing so. And there's often, I find, a lack of understanding around intersectionality. So, my experiences as a white American trans woman is vastly different than, a Black trans woman in Soweto. So where are people coming from? What are the different experiences that they have and identities they have, and how that can affect navigation in these spaces? And so if we're talking about ayahuasca specifically, there's also cultural and linguistic minefields. I've been talking with Shipibo communities about gender and sexual diversity too. And what I'm hearing, which is similar to other countries I've worked in, is that the terms for people who are gender and sexually diverse are actually derogatory. So even if you knew the local term for it, it might be still an insulting word. And finally, people may discover their own feelings and identities in psychedelic medicine spaces, and there might be that lack of support to explore that more. So, for example, in my article, I talk about this. Because I've worked in trans health for 15 years. It's like I have this whole world of people that I can talk to about a transgender experience. And then on the other hand, I have this whole world of people I can talk about an ayahuasca experience, but back then, maybe now it's different, but at the time, there was just very few people I could talk to about that overlapped the two. Where I was finding, when I was sharing my trans experience, people didn't really, in the trans community I was working with, didn't really get the ayahuasca part of it. And then vice versa, in the ayahuasca communities, I was just having to educate people. And that's not what I really wanted to do. I just wanted to integrate. So this is kind of the model that I came up. So at the center is empowered GSD people in psychedelic medicine spaces. And there's three main components, which is education, reciprocity, and right relationship. So under the education part, I have it kind of split up between people who are gender and sexually diverse, and then also psychedelic medicine researchers and scientists, space holders, and advocates. So education for GSD people are resources, networking with others, navigating these psychedelic spaces, referrals, and also education on how to integrate experiences. And then for the others, it's, having those educational training on GSD cultural competency and forms. Forms are really important, as well as how to talk to people in an interview process. So, sometimes in ayahuasca spaces or other psychedelic medicine spaces, my experience, people have filled out forms so you understand who the person is. And then I've never seen a truly gender, I've never seen myself reflected in those forms. So for right relationship, I'm kind of playing with the language around that. And, right relationship, tending to the whole, I think of the Norse mythology of the tapestry, we're all a part, we're all like threads in a great tapestry, or the great web of life. And for this module of the liminal space model for GSD people, that could mean contributing, so their experiences and being more visible, using psychedelic medicine experiences to support larger work of social justice, and then doing the work on our own unconscious and conscious bias. And then for researchers and scientists, space holders, and advocates, ensure that GSD people are represented and counted, like the intake forms and research, or doing outreach to different queer communities. being aware of intersectionality, addressing their own biases, and being receptive to feedback, even if it doesn't feel so good. So on the reciprocity part, GST people can support indigenous cultures where psychedelic medicine may come from, particularly the gender and sexually diverse people in those cultures, and supporting each other in integration, and with other GST people who hold spaces, providing feedback and addressing biases in others, so speaking up. And then for researchers, scientists, space holders, and advocates, supporting broader gender and sexually diversity issues, and understanding how research in these spaces, what are they doing to give back to these communities? Okay, so that's kind of my thinking around the model, and now I'm going to talk to you about how I'm applying this model to an ayahuasca retreat only for gender and sexually diverse people in Peru next year. So I'm partnering with a retreat center that I've worked with a lot. It's Aya Healing Retreats. We're also working with Alianza Arcana, which is a community-based organization in Pucallpa, Peru. And they work a lot with Shipibo communities around agriculture, health, sexual reproductive health, and other topics like that. So we want to provide an empowering space to support before, during, and after the experience. It'll be facilitated by a Shipibo cisgendered male curandero who I've worked with before, and I'm a co-facilitator as well. So with the educational part, I'm talking with a Peruvian national LGBTI organization called Presente, and they will provide the cultural competency training. It will be led by a Peruvian from Lima in Spanish, and we're seeing if we'll need Shipibo translation as well. So the training is it's weird. I was looking through their training, and it's an adaptation of a training that I helped to develop back in 2014. It's more of a workplace training, so there'll need to be some adaptation for a retreat in psychedelic medicine space. And so the trainees will be the staff of Aya Healing Retreats, Alianza Arcana, and another community-based organization, ADIAP. And ADIAP also works with gender and sexually diverse, I'll say sexually diverse Shipibo people. The gender diverse part isn't quite there yet. So, right. And so local gender and sexually diverse people will come into the training and provide their own experiences to these people, so that there's it's not just sensitizing or educating people, but it's also bringing in the real life experience of people and having them be included in the training as well. So for the reciprocity component, we're exploring how a portion of the profits can go back to supporting gender and sexually diverse people locally in the Pucallpa area. So we'll include gender and sexual. Right. So the idea is for this part is to invite people who are queer, gender, and sexually diverse to come to the retreat for a cultural day or days, so that the retreat participants can learn about the experiences of queer people in that locally, and vice versa. So there will be an exchange. And so for right relationship, Alianza Arcana, we've been talking about what they want to do is carry the education to the larger community, integrate it into some of the work that they're already doing with Shipibo communities. And there's a big conversation happening right now in Peru, whereby the government wants to include sexuality and sexual health in the national curriculum, and the Catholic Church is really against that. And so the main media in some of these rural areas is the radio, and so the radio has been very one-sided against this, and so Alianza Araucana is already thinking about how perhaps this training can help them in having these and participating more fully and more informed in these national conversations. And so we're also talking about how this could potentially be replicated in the country too. So if you're interested in learning more, visit this website. You can contact me here too. So in conclusion, psychedelic medicine has helped me so much personally and exploring, living my gender and sexuality, and it's greatly improved my quality of life. So for that, I want to give back. So now I want to support other gender and sexually diverse people in navigating these spaces, integrating experiences, and also improving the quality of medicine spaces, while also connecting this work to the greater whole and how this can translate the experiences to social justice work. So I'd like to acknowledge Bia Labate, Brandon Barclay, Kitty Sipple for the review of the abstract and concept, and just leave you with like a picture of me in drag.
Hello. And I just really want to also, thank Dee for her generosity. And she came from South Africa, self-funded for this conference. And she saw the announcement. And this is the beauty of this project. And I really want everybody to know about this backstages, that we put out the call for abstract. And then we find, we gathered wonderful researchers and human beings like her and Alex, and people that just said, oh my God, this is fabulous, I want to come, sign me up, I'm paying my ticket, I want to help, I want to join. And this makes us so happy. So thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you for funding your trip. Thank you for writing for free. Thank you for being here and for doing this pioneer work and for joining this thing. And also getting Ayahuasca Healings to make a donation. I also want to acknowledge that 3 ayahuasca centers decided to be sponsors. That was a strategy that we adopted. So the story goes like that. We put the announcement, she published her article, massive criticism, and we think, how are we going to react? And then we say, we're going to react with good. You attack us, and we're just going to produce more and more good things. That's the message Chacruna wants to put out. And so we see there is hatred in, some ayahuasca communities, and then we reach out to others that want to step and say and give a clear message that they support gender diverse, sexually diverse people in their settings. So I want to give a big shout out to Ayahuasca Healings, Soltara Healing Center in Costa Rica, and the Temple of the Way of the Light in Peru. They're all sponsors of this conference. Thank you.
Great.
Hello, I'm standing near the microphone. I am curious. I think a thing that I know a thing that's generally been coming up today that I think you spoke a little bit more about is the idea of a safe space. And I don't know that it's a thing that I fully believe in. I think that there are comfortable spaces. I think that there are spaces that can be grounding, but I'm curious about the idea of a safe space while people are also incredibly vulnerable with strangers.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and I think, given my background, I think about as harm reduction. So how can we create these spaces that I guess are safer, and we can do our best to reduce harm as much as we can. And part of that is for me and people I've talked to is, being recognized for who we are, being called the right gender, our preferred name. Maybe this relates more to gender diversity, but I also experienced homophobia and when I was navigating as a gay man in different ayahuasca spaces in Peru in particular. So is there a such thing as a completely safe space? I don't know, but I'm certainly willing to try. Okay, thanks.
I just want to say thank you. This was incredible. I'm wondering how, it's really amazing how you developed the liminal space model, and you spoke about it as a framework earlier, which I think is really powerful. And I know that you used ayahuasca as your main focal point of a medicinal element. How would it or would it not change if it was a different medicinal element in the liminal space model?
Yeah, I think that requires more thinking, right? But I think it could still it can be adapted. It might require, basically what the liminal space is about is it's not just about us, it's about thinking about the greater whole. It's thinking about how we can give back to those who have contributed to us. So I'm not really sure yet, how it could work in a DMT ceremony. It would definitely look different, but yeah, I don't know. I think that I would need to think about that a little bit more. I think that's a good question. The end.
I have a question for you. Why don't you talk a little bit about what's going on in Peru with the Shipibo people you're talking, and what are the connections you have there, and what have you seen? How is that relationship going, the partnership you're envisioning?
Yeah, so Alianza Arcana is really fantastic. There's a lady there named Macarena who's really supporting this work. They're very much interested in working with us, and they work with, she's Mestizo, so she works with Shipibo people, and there are I know before I talked to you about a Shipibo trans person, but that wasn't correct. I had wrong information. So Shipibo-wise, what she told me is that it's a very contextual language, and so the words and I hinted to this before, but the local words are bad words for someone who's gay, lesbian, and she didn't even know if she asked Shipibo people, and they the idea of a gender identity was just foreign, something like trans. So, and it's all based around fruit somehow, and but there are connections to people who are gay and lesbian who are Shipibo, and they face a lot of stigma and discrimination, and it's just a taboo topic that isn't discussed in these communities. And so that's what the hope is that once Alianza Arcana and Ariap are trained, that they're able to have these conversations more confidently and translate them, working with Shipibo people, because there'll be bilingual people who will be in the training who are both Spanish speaking and Shipibo. So understanding how can this be translated into and integrated into their larger work in the communities. Yeah.
Hi, I have a question.
Hi.
I don't know if I'm not, let's see, okay. So one of the things I think about in terms of making spaces like safer is just plain accessibility to the space in the first place.
Yeah.
And I know that class and like access to wealth, sorry, I'm kind of tall. That, that class and
we're in the same boat.
that class and access to wealth are an issue in lots of different communities, and in terms of intersectionality, they can be issues in gender and sexually diverse communities on all different levels, especially around issues of like, I'm imagining there's a lot of people who are white and gender and sexually diverse that would be able to access the retreat that you are presenting. And so I am just curious about like ways that you may be thinking about class and accessibility in that context.
Yeah. So, well, about the retreat particularly, yes. So, there will need to be some fundraising for the retreat that we'll do, because we want to make, like, the training isn't free. We want to pay the LGBT group to come and do the training. We need to pay to hold space, but also wanting to try to raise some money to have scholarships, so that, at least trying to meet people halfway. That's something we're definitely exploring and including in the budget to see how we can make this as accessible as possible. But this is just in Peru. I mean, this model can be replicated in other places more domestically. And, I'd love to learn if you are a queer person who is holding psychedelic medicine spaces. I would love to learn from you and learn about, how you have created your space to be welcoming for other people. Okay. Thank you.